Okay, thanks. Thanks, Chris. Meeting is the July 10th, 2023 Lehigh County Authority Board of Directors meeting. Since I am working remote, I've asked Amir to take over chairing the meeting, so I'll turn it over to Amir.
Thank you, Brian. This is the Lehigh County Authority Board of Director meeting, July 10th, 2023. The meeting is held in hybrid fashion. People live here, but people remotely on the Zoom or on the phone. Lisa, do you have a roll call for the attendees of the board, please?
Roll call of the board, Brian Noggle,
Here.
Amir Kamili,
Here.
Ted Lyons, Linda Rosenfeld, Norman Cusick,
Here.
Kevin Baker,
Here.
Kev Morgan,
Here.
Sean Ziller,
I am here.
Mark Gramis. All right, we have 7 board members present, and it does look like Ted is on his way in a minute. We'll get him accounted for.
Okay, thank you. So the package for the board meeting was sent via email and mail to everybody, our board members. If you have not received it, please see Lisa. She can have that one. Lisa, a review of agenda, please. Having changes, any need for the executive meeting, please?
Okay, yes, so for today's agenda, no changes in the content, no executive sessions planned. I would request, however, that we do a little bit of a rearrangement of the items. I'd like to take the wastewater KISS Act 537 planning item and move it to the top of the action and discussion items. We have some guests here today, and to make the most efficient use of their time, now that go first.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now we move to the approval of the last minutes of last meeting. Norma, you mind leading that, please?
I make a motion that we approve the regular meeting minutes for the June 26th board meeting.
Motion to second. Second. Thank you, Ted. Any, all favors say yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any public comment on the item which is not on the agenda?
No,
Aye.
thank you, Amir.
Thank you.
Yep. No, thank you.
So we're going to move on to our first action item, which is going to be the wastewater.
Yes.
Okay, floor is yours.
Thank you. So, for today's discussion on the Act 537 plan, we're going into the financial realm versus the engineering realm. We've spent a lot of time talking about the modeling and the alternatives analysis. But today we're focused on financial evaluation and institutional evaluation that's required for the Act 537. DEP has an entire section of their checklist. We fondly call it Section 7, related to financial and institutional evaluation that's required. We kicked off this work in December of 2022 when we authorized the team from Raftellus to help us with the phase 1 of the evaluation. So what we're planning to do today, we have three guests here from Raftellus. They're going to share a high-level summary, not in the weeds details, but a high-level summary of the results of phase 1. And then we'll talk a little bit about phase 2 and ask for authorization for us to continue that important work. And at this point, I'd like to recognize and introduce Rocky Corelli from Raftellus. And he has with him, I believe, Zach Green and John Mastracchio, but Rocky is our project manager, who I think we can your presentation. So Rocky, I have your presentation ready to share, but before I bring it up, if you want to make any introductory comments.
Certainly. Can you all hear me? Okay. We're good?
Good.
Okay, great. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to share phase 1 results and talk about next steps. As Lisa pointed out, with me here by phone is John Mastracchio. He's an executive vice president with Raftellus, and my other colleague, Zach Green. He's the lead consultant on this particular project. So we're it's been a it's been a very filled, productive 6 months, and we're kind of excited to show you today some of those results, and then talk about kind of where it needs to go from here to make our refinements and really kind of dig a level deeper. So with that, Liesl, I'm happy to jump in.
Okay. And Rocky, you just let me know when you're ready for me to advance, and I'll advance for you.
Perfect. You can go ahead and go to the next slide then. So as we mentioned, our agenda today is basically just to kind of do a scope review, so you kind of know where, what was our starting point, our starting objectives, and then go from there in terms of some preliminary results and talk about next steps. And we can go from there. So, all right, great. So, as Liesl pointed out, the section 7, if you will, is the financial piece of the Act 537 checklist, and we're looking to dig deeper into that with these particular phase 1 and phase 2 engagements. And essentially, it's really to get a better understanding of the financial implications and the impacts on the signatories as a result of the 537 plan. So our kind of preliminary steps, if you will, phase 1 really was to collect a lot of information. We essentially engaged all of the communities, asked for their cash flows, asked for their operating expenses, their capital expenses. We met individually with each one of them. We had some really great discussions. We also got a far better understanding of LCA's costs as it relates to operating the KISS system. So all of those pieces really were to kind of be knitted together into one kind of comprehensive model that has has essentially mini models for each one of these communities. So it was a lot of information, but we stitched it all together as kind of the phase 1, and to look at each as the kind of the overall implication, if you will, of the kind of first option of the engineering that we got from engineering. So those are the preliminary steps, kind of broken down a bit more. The data collection review, the current state cost analysis. I want to take just a moment here and say that we wanted to identify each one of the community's costs, and as I said, dig into that a little bit more, because really the costs that get paid to, or the revenue that gets paid to LCA for the KISS shared costs are really just a subset of each community's costs. They have their own administrative costs. They may even have additional treatment costs to another entity. They have their collection system costs, those kinds of things. So it was really important for us to really dig into what the current state is, not just for LCA, but for all of the communities. And as you might imagine, that took quite a bit of time. But I think we got there, and we're really using budget data for each one of these communities going forward as the baseline. So I just want to stress that right there, is we collected data from all the communities and signatories, and that's our baseline, is their data, really, their 2023 budgets. So, and then after we had that baseline, really the kind of the next step was to, before we kind of crawl before we can walk analogy, is really we wanted to take an understanding of what this cost would be at a high level, and how that might impact all of them overall based on the same percent increase. And we'll get into that, and it'll make a little bit more sense as we go along. But really that kind of current state financial and rate projection, and then we took that overall percent and we layered it on to their current bills, and you'll see some of the results of that later. But so started from the 2023 baseline, worked on a projection going forward, and then we're reporting out both to you today, as well as on Wednesday we have a meeting with the signatories to have our kind of final phase 1 report out. All right, digging into the analysis, just to kind of give you a quick overview. Liesl, if you hit a couple buttons, I think there we go. We want to show each one of these things. Essentially, we developed multi-year long-term financial plans for each one of the signatories, but we did it from a cash flow perspective. And it's just important to note that it's a little bit different than the income statement data that I'm sure most of you or all of you are aware of, has like depreciation and some of those other things. Really, from our perspective, it was a cash flow. What's the cash needs? And that's, operating costs, that's capital as it relates to debt service, or cash funded capital, those kinds of things. And then understanding the amount of cash on hand in a reserve or a starting balance, and then understanding some of the policies around that going forward. And we've made some assumptions on that, which we'll get into in just a little bit. But really, we've, as I mentioned earlier, created these like mini financial plans for each one of the signatories. And then what as I alluded to a little bit earlier, is it's fascinating because this KISS stuff is really a subset of costs for all the communities. And so what we wanted to do is understand that for some communities, the KISS shared costs are a very small amount of their overall revenue requirements, and that ultimately impact the bill. And others, it's a very large piece of their overall budgets for wastewater. And so for each one, it is different, and that kind of that shared cost piece. But then going forward, we wanted to look at all of the costs so that we understood that that customer bill might change by a certain percentage. That's not exactly what the KISS shared costs are, because they have other costs. And so if it's a larger share, then that bucket has a larger impact on the kind of resulting customer bills for each one of the communities. Or if it's a smaller piece, then obviously a smaller impact. And so we wanted to kind of provide a pictorial view of that. We needed to really understand both the KISS shared costs and what the relative responsibilities are, but then also understand the other costs involved for the community so that we could accurately forecast that customer bill.
Rocky, I'd like to just stop here for a minute and make sure that the board kind of understands this piece, because I think this is a really important component of all of the rest of your work, understanding the difference between what is shared cost versus what each municipality has to pay for their own system. So just as an example, in the city of Allentown, we have the Kleins Island treatment plant, and we have other costs that are part of the regional system, but then the city has their own collection system that is not a shared cost. So it's part of the cost makeup that goes into the rate making. But the piece that's shared with all the municipalities is really the focus of the Act 537. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate you pointing that out. It really is kind of getting into the weeds then of the responsibilities, but it is important to understand that, to know that what is shared and what is not shared. Additionally, wanted to kind of point out a few of the things here, just very at a high level: the Kleins Island, the treatment plant, the Western Lehigh interceptor, as well as the Little Lehigh Relief Interceptor, and then ultimately the pretreatment plant, as those kind of pieces of the system that are shared. But as Lisa mentioned, we are getting into that kind of next level down of kind of what's the city collection is going to be not shared per se, but then there's a small portion that's shared. But then understanding that these interceptors and the pretreatment plants are also shared among the other signatories. So as Lisa pointed out, it's very important. It's that kind of very important piece of understanding what is part of that shared system and thus impacted by the Act 537 plan versus what is not. Okay. Looking at some of the other key assumptions and qualifiers, we are starting from a financial analysis again on the 23 budgets, and then the increases to the LSA costs were kind of at the same percentage to all others. But basically, we took that, I guess, if you will, each community has a certain amount that was budgeted for this particular year, 2023, that they're intending to pay LCA for KISS shared costs. We've used that, and that's unique to every community, and we're using that as the baseline, and then we're layering on the same increase to each one of those kind of revenue requirements, each one of the communities. And that same increase is based on what we're projecting the increase to be based on an engineering scenario that will address the 537 plan. And so that's, we're starting with each one's communities 2023 budgets, but then the same increases apply. And that's just, again, phase one, how we've been scoped to kind of carry out that analysis. And then just a few other things, that refinements that we anticipate in phase two is to kind of think about more of, financing options. And I think the next slide, actually, so we'll highlight some of that. This is the one option that we have that we've folded into this particular analysis. And in the next phase, we'll seek to get refinements, and that'll come in two ways. One is timing. So right now we've had to make some assumptions as to when that cash flow is going to happen, that capital expenditure is going to happen. And so as you see, we kind of layered on these costs by different types of costs or big buckets of costs, but essentially that's the timing assumption. That will be refined in phase two, as will the overall amount of these buckets. And so this will be subject to change and will change, but this is kind of that first scenario that we're using. It's also important to point out this is in 2023 dollars. As we looked at financing within our modeling, we did inflate the capital plan in future years to better represent what we might anticipate in total cost.
So Rocky, again, if you don't mind, I'll just jump in
Please.
here and say that the board has seen presentations on the engineering around these different components. So we did a presentation on pretreatment plant master plan, or Phil has talked to us probably several times now about wet weather projects at Klein's Island and the core conveyance project. So what this graph does is converts those engineering projects into an annual spend in each of those categories, just sort of generally spread across the 537 planning time period with some assumptions. That's all going to be refined and totally redone as we get through the final alternatives analysis that's being done by the engineers. But Raftellus needed something to put into the model so that they could start building out the financial evaluation. So we don't want to focus on what the dollars look like or the flow of the spending so much as that, oh, these categories of spending look familiar to you. You've seen and heard about projects that might be in each of these categories. And we'll get more into that in phase two.
Question.
Yes.
So these costs, these are non-allocated by municipality. They're just lump sum, macro, snapshot view of what this is going to perhaps look like marching forward.
Yeah, and to kind of get to some of Rocky's comments before about the proportionate increase to everybody, all we're doing is saying this is the kind of a high level look at the total cost for 537 projects, and we're all going to share all of those costs equally based on how we're paying today. That's not necessarily going to be the reality when we get out the other side, but for now, for phase one, to look at financing capacity and some high level rate impacts.
So
good
around existing LCA cash capital, what does that mean?
Yeah, so the first bar of 2023 is essentially what we're spending on capital in this year's budget.
Okay.
And then what we have said is that the existing capital plan would be replaced by these projects.
So question for you then. So right now, capital projects are paid for by capacity owned by each municipality. And then certain, like Klein's Island, everybody owns a piece of the pie, but other potential upgrades or facilities may not be owned by everybody, right? So you have to sort through all of that and have costs allocated. They're not going to be allocated to somebody who doesn't use that facility, right? So
that's a phase two evaluation. Right now, the point of phase one is to look at broadly the regional capacity to do this much work financially. Rocky, anything you want to add to that? Hope I got it right.
You got it. It was great. Yep.
Just a quick questions. So the CE require for option one versus option two, the delta between them are not that significant, which could impact the modeling they do at the high level, correct?
At the high level, no, what will impact it will be the phasing and then the cost sharing. So for example, we did no phasing whatsoever for the purple bars for the pre-treatment. We just said, take the entire amount and divide it equally over the course of the program. That's not how it's actually gonna happen. If it's front loaded, we're gonna try to do all that work in the first 10 years. That's greatly gonna impact the model. But at a high level, you know, the total dollars are roughly the same. Rocky, I'm moving on.
Sounds good. I just wanted to give a quick overview of some of the assumptions that we used in this initial analysis. It will be refined as we kind of mentioned, to be community specific, specifically, for example, growth. If some communities are experiencing growth, then basically the entire system really benefits from some of that, because essentially a larger denominator, if you will, in terms of amount of flow. But we'll be digging into that. Right now, we wanted consistency really in this first phase across to all communities and across the assumptions for different costs, as much consistency as possible really. And so we provided that from a funding perspective. You know, there's a number of different ways that the funding could be sliced and diced between debt and cash, and how that might look. We've taken a 50-50 approach to kind of that 50% will be paid with cash in that particular year, and then 50% will be financed. That will be refined in phase two as we dig into that kind of final engineering option, and then also looking at what's the best way to cost share these among the signatories, and that will also have an impact on kind of that cash and financing breakdown. And then the next slide, we wanted to once again look at it from at an overall impact. And so really what I wanted to point out first is that our starting point is that KISS shared cost of the system divided by the amount of flow for all the signatories, and so we have that overall unit rate. No one has assessed that in terms of a customer or anything like that. So it's really important to not latch onto it as an actual rate. It is a unit rate, where it's simply the kind of the amount of cost divided by the total demand, and including stormwater inflow and infiltration. So like the total units that we look at. And then what is kind of then the next important piece is going forward is just layering on those assumptions that we just talked about in terms of the capital plan, how it's financed, and the overall increase that's needed to cover those costs. And so we start from that one point, and then we're projecting that unit rate over time. And you might see that it's a little bit steeper in the first 10 years, and that's because we have a bit more of a ramp up of costs in the first 10 years. And then it starts to kind of level out a little bit towards the end of the forecast as we get kind of a more steady state financing and impact of operations and things. So that's the kind of takeaway from this particular slide. We wanted to show you that kind of over time. And then we're going to kind of pivot a little bit and say, all right, that overall increase was shared proportionally to all of the communities in our financial analysis. And then we wanted to look at some customer impacts. And so we needed a new starting point for that. And so we looked at the current rates for each one of those communities. You can see here. And in the column listed there is a calculated bill at 13,000 gallons per quarter, what they currently pay. And then what we did was we took that percent increase from that prior slide, if you will, the kind of the slope of the line, applied that to the baseline costs that they all have in their own budgets, and then we layered that onto the customer impacts. And so we were able to forecast what the customer bill will be from today all the way through 2050. And we wanted to look at that through the lens of an affordability piece, which is the next slide. And really, right here, we're showing kind of a forecast of customer bills as it relates to median household income. And we wanted to show you a couple different communities kind of at a low, medium, high range, but all underneath a 2% rule. And really that, there are many ways to look at affordability, if you will, but the kind of EPA's 2% rule is really designed to look at it from that kind of community-wide basis. And so that's what we elected to show here. And basically as a kind of a feasibility analysis of whether or not these costs show any type of initial adverse impacts to the customer. Certainly rates are going up, certainly costs are going up, but we wanted to kind of look at that 2% threshold and see if communities stayed underneath that. And indeed, all the communities stayed underneath that particular metric.
So Rocky, I'm going to jump in again here just to make sure that it's clear. So when we look at each community and we look at what they're paying or what they're charging to their residents, we also need to look at the demographics or the income profile of each community. So the median household income of community A might be very different from the median household income of community B. But that 2% threshold that Rocky was talking about is a guidepost that EPA has published and saying if your sewer bill is less than 2% of median household income, it's considered generally affordable. So what 2% means is different for each community because the median household income is different. So what this slide with the different lines are trying to show is not what the bill would be or what the rate increases would be, but for the community that has the greatest level of affordability to the community that has the highest burden, all of them are underneath that 2% guidepost. And
also
that generally indicate that the projects are affordable or financeable. Does that make sense?
Can you go back to the other graph, the one before the rates? So just in my simple brain, if you look at this, can you just assume that your current sewer bill is going to go up 4 times? That'd be a good estimate for all of this from this unit graph, basically speaking.
Rocky,
This
can you?
portion of the costs will, based on this graph, we're showing that the unit rate for that KISS shared costs would go up by approximately 3.5, almost 4%. But again, that's just a subset of other communities' costs. So if it's a small subset, then only, a very small portion of their entire costs are going to go up by 3 times over 25 years. If it's a large set, then it'll go up a little bit more, like 3 times over 25 years. But it's not so much that the customer bill, but it's definitely, it could be a small or a large portion depending on the community.
Thank you.
Is that chart adjusted for inflation taken out or includes inflation?
It
So
includes inflation.
Okay. And then the other question I had was, in terms of the communities that are high burden, medium burden, low burden, was it determined what percentages of each one of those categories? I'm just curious, like, is like 50% high burden, 25% mid burden, 25% low burden? How does that work out?
No, we just, perhaps, I apologize for any confusion, but essentially we just meant that the one that's closer to the line, that community from kind of a community-wide standpoint is slightly higher burden than some of those, than the ones below it. It has nothing to do with this chart has nothing to do with kind of the percent of the cost space within their overall costs. So it was just meant more of like high, medium, and low. We wanted to kind of show you that there are some communities that are, kind of lower than others. And that's likely influenced by the fact that some might be a much smaller piece of the overall pie versus a larger piece. That's a good point. And also like to stress that this doesn't mean every single bill. Like if you kind of got down to every customer bill, there will certainly be customers higher and lower than these lines. It's just a kind of an EPA acceptable community-wide assessment approach, and that's what we chose to do here.
Comment. Going forward, it might be helpful if you, I'm good at micro, not macro. If you would take one community and show exactly what's going on there as an example,
Yeah.
it might be more digestible than past 1,000. It's just a thought going forward.
We specifically chose not to do this for this phase because the numbers are conceptual.
Okay.
But
Fair
what we'll present privately to each municipality would be their
Oh, sure.
impact, yeah.
And so this analysis is following EPA's guidance for these types of things. I think there's like a 2021 guidance manual out there or something like that. Kind of following that generically to kind of, because the DEP is gonna wonder where we came up with benchmarks, things
Yeah.
like that, right?
The 2% of median household income is EPA's accepted guidepost. And what DEP Pennsylvania will look at is maybe a little less well-defined, but generally we are expected to present a plan that solves the problem and is affordable by however we might define it.
I think we have to
And
get
this is
that.
just one thing to look at as part of the guidance that's out there. There are a number of different things that we can show to support kind of our proposed plan based on kind of from an affordability perspective. So, and we'll be working through that and whatnot, but just the kind of the 2% is the easiest thing to kind of slap onto a graph and evaluate. But we can, again, there are other pieces to look at.
You know, I agree. I just ultimately, when we start making final decisions, you know, there are a lot of people who are below the median income, so
Yeah.
it's gonna impact them much more 2% than it does for people who are at or above. So we have to keep that in mind. That's all.
So it's outside the scope of what we're gonna do. Yeah, obviously in this phase, is we're done with phase 1 or even in phase 2, but as we get toward really putting together the final plan for community approvals, some of the communities may be looking for much deeper dive on affordability by lowest quintile or by census tract level, because recognizing that there are some portions of the community that will really struggle with these kinds of rate increases.
To wrap up, I have 2 wrap-up slides here. Essentially, just wanted to point out that as that one line chart showed, the increases are highest in the first 10 years. Again, that's likely the trajectory of that's likely to change as we refine the capital plan, but the takeaways likely to be the same because we do anticipate a ramp up in the earlier years to address a lot of the projects. The second thing is, again, high level, subject to change, but we're under that 2% threshold, which we talked about. It appears to be affordable long term, but we'll be digging deeper into that and great suggestion, kind of after maybe a phase 3 in terms of kind of digging into a more robust affordability analysis for the communities if that's desired at that particular time. And then this is kind of making that first crawl before you can walk. We took that first step and kind of looking at it from a total, more of a kind of a same percentage consistency perspective. But as we pointed out today, we really now need to start digging into what project buckets are applicable to which signatories and making sure that everybody's sharing in the same cost and figuring out how, and then ultimately figuring out how to best share that cost as we kind of put out, finance it and then share the cost as I put in bullet number 4. And then in terms of the next steps, phase 1, we're wrapping up right now. Phase 2, which we provided Lisa with a proposal on how to execute that with the various tasks. We foresee that over the next 6 months or so, wrapping up around January 2024, where we'll have a far deeper dive into the responsibility of each signatory, perhaps looking into alternative cost sharing and really refining that, or at least accepting that refined engineering option so that we can really hone in on more of an appropriate cash flow and that final dollar amount. So with that, appreciate your Q&A during the thing. Great questions. If there's anything else at this particular time, or Lisa, if you'd like to make any final remarks, we'd be happy to do that.
Before we get into the phase 2 request, maybe a good time to break and see if there's questions on what will be presented.
No question per se, but we've talked in the past about how the costs are shared with municipalities and how these agreements are pretty old. And probably not that, I hate to use the term fair, but not up to date, let's call it that way. That's a different item hanging out here completely. Are these two going to be blended at some point in trying to get these agreements, cost share agreements, up to date as how it gets folded into these projects?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you'd like, I can go into what phase 2 is all about, which is really right on that
Okay.
point. So phase 2 is what we're suggesting we move forward on quickly, because we're at the stage now of just understanding the broad financial impacts. And as Phil is working forward on the engineering and getting the alternatives really nailed down, we really need to dig in deep on how we're going to share those costs. So the modeling work that Reftelis did can only go so far until we know more about how the costs will be shared. And so, you know, until we have that nailed down, all there really can do is guess about how we're going to share those costs. So phase 2 is 100%, well, not 100%, but very largely focused on that piece. And again, recognizing that the longstanding municipal agreements are in place would dictate how some of the projects might be shared, but not all of them. That we don't have terms in place in those agreements that actually fit with all the projects that we're anticipating needing to do. So, you know, as the final alternatives analysis is going to hone in on what we're doing with the pretreatment plant or Martin Luther King Interceptor, those are the kinds of projects that are just not contemplated in any of the existing agreements. So, and the other piece which you alluded to, Ted, is that the existing agreements are difficult to administer, and some of the signatories, not universally, but some of the signatories have asked if we could look at simpler methodology to share costs and do the billing so that it's easier for them to communicate with their elected officials and their customers about rates and all that stuff. So we want to look at all of that in this phase, and Reftelis is going to facilitate those discussions with the signatories. And so if you looked at the proposal or in the memo with the professional service authorization, a lot of the hours and time in phase 2 are focused on these signatory engagement workshops. And those workshops are really focused on finding ways to get the signatories to share what their opinions are about how the agreements work today, what's working, what's not working, and then explore options for alternative cost sharing going forward. And then using the results of those to refine the model and do a deeper dive on the financial analysis so we can understand if those ideas work. And the other piece that's part of, I think a really important part of phase 2 is about the existing financing capacity for LCA. So we operate under the terms of the lease agreement with Allentown, and we have our Western Lehigh communities. They are financially separate organizations almost in a way, and our ability to finance these very large projects in either or both of those parts of the organization, we need to really understand what those constraints are so that you can start putting a financing plan together for the projects. And that's a lot of work to do in the next 6 months, but we really feel the timeline is achievable with Reftelis coming here, doing one-on-one meetings with each signatory to get feedback, some group sessions, a lot of time spent looking at the alternatives, and then hopefully getting that work done around the December, January timeframe, which would be kind of in advance of actually finalizing those plans, writing the document. Phil has kind of reminded us all many times that September of 2024, so a little more than a year from now, we need to have the entire Act 537 plan written. And so if we hit this target of January 2024 for phase 2, that'll give us, 6 months or 8 months to work on finalizing the actual documentation of what goes to DEP. Rocky, anything you want to say about your proposal or any of the steps that I might have missed that we're gonna attack in phase 2?
I think you summarized it great there, Liesl. We're excited. We realize it's a tall order, but we really think the tasks laid out provide us that pathway to get done by January, and then present to you all again, likely at that particular time, and talk about whether where we need to go for phase 3. But we understand the amount of work and the need for kind of again digging deeper, and we really think that this next set of tasks for phase 2 will really help us dig into that kind of financial analysis, as well as the relationships and the cost sharing and the financing of it, that everyone's kind of anxious to hear about. So
I think it's definitely important for us to have as a board an affordability goal. Just because the EPA manual says something, I've worked with other communities who said, well, 2% of median income for a water bill, and then you have 2% of median income for a sewer bill. That, we're not happy with that. They had a goal of 1% median income for water, 1% for sewer, 2% total. So I think we need to sort out based on what the needs are, what our goal is, and how we can spread it out so that it's fair to, everybody in the service area. I've seen lots of different, thoughts on that. So that should be interesting to sort out.
Well, we might have different opinions by
Yeah,
each municipality.
yes,
And
exactly.
the fact is we don't directly bill customers except for in Allentown and small upper Milford, Hill. 50% of the customers in the KISS system are billed by other entities, and they have their own rate making process and their own thoughts on what their customer needs are. So Tellus is a kind of a big hill to climb to gather all of that feedback and try to make some sense of what everyone's really looking for, and the different drivers for each community. So the authorization that we're asking for today is a continuation of a capital project authorization that was approved back in December for phase 1. We'd like to extend that into phase 2. Tellus proposal is on target. We worked with them on the scope and I think they've captured very well what we want to achieve in phase 2. And I want to say also that because phase 2 is very deep in the signatory relationship side of things, building on the work that Rocky and his team did with each of the signatories in phase 1, I think is makes them a really good partner for it. They met with each one individually without any LCA staff, was able to build the bridge and have those open conversations with each signatory already. So I think they'll be able to transition into this maybe a little more sensitive work pretty well. So their proposal is attached. There's a capital project authorization for $209,442, and that includes a professional services authorization for Tellus for phase 2 in the amount of $174,442.
Any other question from board members? So seeking capital authorization for the amount of the $209,442 for KISS Act 537 plan for financial and institutional evaluations.
I'll make a motion.
Motion from Jeff,
I'll second it. It's Norma.
second by Norman. Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Rocky, for your presentation. Appreciate that.
Thank you for the opportunity today. Liesl, we drop off then at this point?
Yeah, that's fine, and I'll be in touch after the meeting for
All right,
details.
thank you all again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, we're gonna move to LCA strat plan update.
Yes. Yeah, I'll do this presentation, then I'm done. Other people can present the rest of the meeting. So the strategic plan progress report, quarterly progress report was attached to the board packet in the yellow sheets. And I do have a little bit of a presentation to sort of walk through some of the highlights here and share some insights about where we are with our strategic initiatives. So. That's 1 second. I don't know why that bar is stuck in the middle there. No worries. So the strategic plan was adopted in December of 2021 and generally covers a 5-year period. We just kicked off some of these initiatives last year in January 2022, and we've been doing quarterly reports since that time. So today I wanted to highlight some key initiatives and accomplishments, as well as a couple of challenges or barriers and that we've been facing. Just as a reminder, because we do have a couple of newer board members, our 2021 strategic plan was developed around an updated mission and vision statement that are shown here. And then these 6 priority areas were identified and detailed at some length within the strategic plan document. So you can see the range of things that we covered in the strategic plan, from employee engagement to operations, customer engagement, finance, et cetera. And this is an excerpt from the strategic plan. I don't expect you to be able to read it, just to give you an idea of the scope. So we had our vision, our mission, our values, the details on these 6 priority areas, and then that cascades down into 21 strategies and a set of metrics. And even further, those 21 strategies, the staff worked out into activities. And so there's a lot that comes out of the strategic plan. These broad priorities, the 21 strategies, the initial sequence of activities came out to 70 different individual distinct items we wanted to be working on. And in conversation with the board, we had a lot of discussion about, so what does it really mean and what's most important? What should we really be focused on? Because this is a lot. And what we've done is, over the past 2 years, really boiled it down into 5 key initiatives that we've been reporting on and really focusing our resources on. So the 5 areas are shown on the left: asset management, process improvement, water and wastewater capacity, employee engagement and safety, and operational excellence. And what we've reported on to the board are a series of milestones that we're hoping to achieve in 2024. And you can see each of them have a different number of milestones, total of 24 key milestones we're trying to achieve. Just to kind of keep it simple, I did this little donut graph on their status, where we are right now. You can see half of them are on target. And then the other half are in various stages of either not started or in a caution state or at risk. I'm going to just focus on the ones that are not started, in a caution state, or at risk. Details, if you want to know about all of them, are in the report itself. So when I mention items are not started, and just the color coding is intentional, the not started ones are still green. Because we believe that they're still very likely to be completed on schedule. They just haven't been started yet. They're either a planned delay or just in a priority fashion. They're not started yet. So the very first item relates to board delegation of duties, and this is something that we've talked about for a little while now. And Brian has been working on concepts around committees, board committees that would help us deal with governance issues and getting to that piece. It is something that is important to the staff that we get nailed down, and we think that that's not a super heavy lift, but requires some board involvement. So I wanted to highlight that. The next two related to employee engagement, the new employee check-in process, the retirement risk profile. Those are two items that we feel confident can be completed this year. They've just been a little bit lower on the priority list compared to some of the other things we're focused on. And then actually the last one as well relates to our safety program and what the staffing requirements are. We do have current staff here, one of whom is in the room today. And just talking about what the staffing requirements are. We'll work on that more in the third or fourth quarter. So no real issues there. The ones that are in caution status, I have kind of that yellow light on there. These are items that are on track. They're in progress, but we anticipate some form of schedule adjustment will be required. And there's three of them that fall into this category. First one relates to defining all of our key maintenance programs within CityWorks, and that falls in the asset management category. There's a lot of work that's going into developing our strategic asset management plan and defining or identifying maintenance programs and maintenance schedules for all of our assets. And this really just relates to getting it all into the system, into CityWorks. And whether we achieve that this year or it leads into next year, I think is still the question mark, because it is a pretty big task to get all of our maintenance activities really defined in the system. The Munis ERP implementation, we've talked a lot about this project and how important it is. And this one is another one that's on track, but as we're learning more about what it's going to take to implement this, we're understanding that it might take a little more time. Certainly, I can tell you today, it's not going to be done this year. And we're looking at possibly mid-year next year, because there's an awful lot of new modules and data sets that need to be put together and implemented, as well as converting our old data into the new system. So on track, but a schedule adjustment on that one. And this last one is really kind of a small one, but it is a schedule adjustment. The Klein's Island Pumping Improvements Project. We wanted to have design phase completed in 2023, and just with some options that we're looking at for the design of that project. It's a very critical, large project, so we want to make sure that our project concepts are done right, and we might be a month or two off on that particular one. So the at-risk ones are maybe a little more concerning from the standpoint of our ability to achieve these this year, and really the focus of the external impacts that are impacting our progress in these three main areas. The asset management technology staffing has been a challenge. We lost some key staff last year. We've hired 2 of the 3 positions in. We're still working on defining the 3rd position. And when we lost internal resources with a high degree of familiarity with our systems, it's been a little bit more of a challenge to bring new staff on and get them up to speed. So we may have this completed this year, but we don't know what the recruiting is going to look like and how that will work out once we've identified the 3rd staff person and how the team will come together. The second item, there's kind of 3 sub bullets under here related to onboarding of new employees or standardizing the onboarding program for new employees, for new supervisors, and also how safety training gets incorporated into the onboarding process. These three areas have been identified as important items, but we've had some transition within our HR staff, and these have taken a little bit more of a back burner compared to some other high priority items. And Ed and team are going to give a great presentation on safety today, so we'll understand what the priorities are on safety and why this one's maybe slipping a little bit lower. And then the last one, hate to say this because we've talked so much about Sand Spring, but where we've stated our goal is to implement the Sand Spring compliance plan this year. It seems a little bit out of our hands at this point, not completely, but to some degree, because we have not received feedback from DEP on our submission of the compliance plan. And with the kind of the evolution of discussion with North Whitehall Township about their desire to have a full township-wide Act 537 plan, this plan would roll into the township's overall sewage plan, treatment plan. And so we're not 100% sure where that's going to go and how Sand Springs will be resolved. But there are some near-term things that we're hoping to implement there that will help. So those are the three main areas that we think are at risk from within our strategic plan items for 2023. And personally, I think the good news is, and we should be pretty happy, are very happy with this result, that more than 80% of our goals for this year appear to be on track. And we have done some proactive identification of the items that are going to slip, and we'll figure out the looking forward. So I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes on major barriers as well that we're talking about and in some ways hamper our ability to achieve goals. Staffing and turnover, we've talked about this in prior meetings, but pretty much every department here at LCA has been impacted by turnover in some way, whether it's retirements or just general turnover, and that does take away from our ability to keep moving forward on some of these big initiatives. Consultant support has faced similar kinds of impacts. So we use a lot of consultants for some of our work, and they're all facing turnover issues, and that impacts our ability to stay on track with some of our projects. I think the third and fourth ones, though, are probably even greater impacts for us. The new stuff that's come at us over the last 2 years with PFAS, with lead service line issues, the grant opportunities, it takes time to pursue grant opportunities. That's important for us to do. All of these things have kind of shifted our priorities a little bit away from some of the things that are in the strategic plan, and why we see some of those items showing in the at-risk category. And then the last one, I wasn't sure how to say it other than the project weight. These projects are huge. Trying to develop a whole brand new way of looking at asset management, or trying to put together this Act 537 plan and decide what we're going to do for the region. And our Munis project. These are cross-organizational, really big things that we're trying to do. And I think in 2021, we didn't necessarily appreciate the time commitment and staff commitment that it would take. And there's a lot of people in this room who are involved in all three of these things. So I think we're working through it as best we can, and we are making awesome progress despite these barriers. Really, really proud of the team for the work effort and achievements. Some of the next steps, actually, just later this week, staff groups getting together for a workshop session to talk about strategy alignment and priorities. and really dig into the resource requirements. So what do we need to be able to stay on track with the things that we think are most important? And how does that fit into our 2024 budget assumptions? And the budget assumptions will then come to the board for more discussion in September. Ed? Budget assumptions in September?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they usually start coming in earlier than that, but we'll call it September.
So I wanted to put this slide up because I think it's important for the board to understand that we're trying to keep our focus on the strategic plan, and that may require different resources or additional resources. We've used the budget assumptions phase of the budgeting process as a way to talk about those things, and we plan to do that again this year once we have some time together to work on priorities. That's end of my report. There's no action here today, but happy to discuss and answer any questions you might have.
You said safety presentation is today? Okay.
I guess the trick is to try to balance between getting the everyday job done, every week job done, plus 70 activities you've identified, right? Where they all fit and everyone's got to have a week or 5 weeks. It's be a push.
Yeah, it is a lot. Some of it also, I think about asset management, and AJ, if you want to chime in on asset management at all, please do. I feel like it's a whole new way of thinking about what we do, but it actually, in some ways, just replaces or changes what we're already doing. So if we're doing 120 activities related to maintenance and capital planning now, once we have the asset management program more defined and in place, those 120 activities may shift into 120 different activities. AJ, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
That's all right.
But developing the program is kind of the hard lift. Okay. There's nothing else. That's all I have on that one.
Now we move to the water.
You want to do the safety?
Sure.
Safety program, we don't have anything for the board to look at, no paper in the packet. This is just a presentation, and Ed will lead us through that one.
So before we get into all of the safety items that we have in the presentation here today, believe that it's the last time that we did a formal report on this risk management and safety was probably 2017 or 2017. So it's probably pre-COVID. And the last presentation I saw was for 2016, so that would have occurred. So it's been a while since we talked about this. So I think it's really good to catch up on some of the things that exist, some of the things that we're working on. And I've invited Kevin Gervin, who is our risk and safety manager, to come in and lead us through some of the presentation as well. So Kevin, if you would like to, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Ed said, we have a short presentation. We're going to start with the program overview. Not sure there you go. What we're looking at, our goals is to maintain some high safety awareness among employees, to really get employees involved in safety. And as far as a company, ensure safe working environment, and also recognize and mitigate all the hazards that we have out there creeping around us here. And some of our strategic initiatives for 2023, implement employee health and safety steering committee, known as the EHS, improve incident investigations and reporting, and improve safety metrics, and also enhance employees on onboarding program. Moving on, the AHS organization is a steering committee that's just been newly formed. We'll talk about the committee members in a later slide. I myself, as the risk manager, I will be taking suggestions and some recommendations from the steering committee and implementing them, and also updating the health and safety policy. And also after the health and safety policy, we'll go over some of that in a later presentation. We have the facilities, we have specific safety committees. We have 4 of them. We can go to the next slide. Our safety committees, they were established in 2013. That's when we joined the city. We decided we needed more information on safety from each facility. So Allentown Field Services, Water Filtration Plant, Klein's Island Wastewater Treatment Plant, and Suburban Operations meet every other month. We also have 2 members of a union representation, and at least 2 members of the management or supervisor or foreman in each committee. And like I say, we meet every other month. Unless there's an emergency, we'll meet in between there if needed. We can move on to the next one. Ed, do you want to hit on
Yep,
this one?
this one I'll talk about. We did implement the EHS steering committee. It is new. It was it kind of came about because of my prior life, prior to LCA, in private organizations, where one of them was really good with respect to safety. And they were an OSHA VPP business. And one of the things that we found very useful was this overall overarching steering committee. And one of the things I think that that struck out at me was it was basically a team of people that could get together from a multi-function area and talk about safety and challenges of safety. So as you look at who's on the steering committee, you see myself as the executive sponsor. Well, the risk manager is also involved in this. We brought in 2 from operations so that we can get a direct dialogue with operations between Andrew and Chris. Wanted to make sure that we covered the human resource side with Anne Marie, and then brought in Lisa at the end, because at a period of time I realized while I was conducting meetings, I could not take notes. And she does a really good job of keeping us in tune with meetings, getting together. So I thought it was an important thing to do to improve it. Is we go on to the next slide. This will give you some of the reasons why. Well, obviously, we developed this to improve the overall safety performance of the entire safety program and vehicles. So really wanted to get management involved in safety. It's very difficult, I found over the years, to say your safety manager or risk manager is going to do this all by themselves. Unfortunately, they run up to where they just feel like they're banging their head off the wall because they're the only one with any skin in the game. So bringing everybody into safety was really important, and the committee, I think, was supposed to do that, and so far is doing that. Another reason why is so that we promote safety awareness across the organization. Ultimately, the success of any safety program in my book is very dependent on everybody's involvement. We could say that there's people doing various roles in it, but at the end of the day, it takes the entire group of people that are willing to look at something and say, hey, this isn't right. People that are willing to say, this is going to cause an accident. And that's not just the EHS steering committee and the individual safety committees. It is the entire population of people that work here. What the EHS steering committee, I think, does is help us look at resources and actually make sense of the things that we need to do, what it's going to cost to do it, and being able to use what financial and people resources are available fairly and efficiently. I wanted this group, I think, to start looking at policies. Like any other program, you get into where you have a lot of things in paper, but they tend not to get updated on a regular enough basis. So we're gonna indulge in some of that. And I think that the last purpose was so that we could provide some direction to the safety committee so that we're all on the same page, working in the same goals. And we could actually work that down to the safety committee level.
This is some of our safety, part of our safety program. We have fire safety in that. This is part of the health and safety manual too. We have head protection. I just want to touch on the head protection, and this came out of safety meetings that we had, and mostly for field services personnel. We had an incident that we had a worker in a trench, and a rock got kicked, just a little 4-inch rock got kicked and got him in the base of the skull. And with the head protection that we had currently, not currently, before this happened, was just the top, hard hats, small hard hats. So we went to an MSA hard hat, which actually protects your temple and your back of the skull now. So it's a full head protection, and it has eye protection right in it and ear protection. And that came out of our safety meetings with, meeting with DNC and meeting with operations. And they said they needed more head protection, and that's what we did. So that's where it shows our committees are really working well. Also with eye protection, we added, since we met, we added a new eyeglass plan, which anybody that has prescription eyeglasses, we provide the safety glasses for them with side shields, and they can pick from several different frames. And you can see we have handling flammables. I'm not going to name them all. Name some of the real important ones that we're looking at, and that's fall protection and confined space. We're actually, the EHS committee is currently working to improve our current policies and all our SOPs, and actually looking at fall protection, replacing our older fall protection to newer protection. Electrical safety also, that's an important one. We have an arc flash program, and that's for those individuals that are really messing around with high voltage and being in with high voltage. We provide arc flash safety equipment for those individuals. Also working alone, we have a special unit that when they're working alone in some of the plants, if they press that button, they carry the little pager along with them. If they press the button, their supervisor will be notified that they're down or they're having problems. And also we do some working in near traffic. Any questions on that?
So I'm going to talk about what the EHS steering committee, what we would call our hot list right now is. We're looking at revamping our incident reporting forms and our safety metrics. We looked at the initial reporting form, and that seemed to be okay. What we thought was missing was a comprehensive form that would be a checklist when we were looking at the accident investigation. And again, this is based on prior life. It's a whole lot more thorough, more complete to do an investigation when you can check off things, yes, no, right comments, and make sure that you're covering all the bases when you're actually doing an investigation. And we found that that would be something that we need to do. And quite frankly, what I could conclude was it's some of the prior incidents. The reporting wasn't suggesting a solution or causing us action. And we want these things to cause action, because ultimately you don't want that incident to repeat again. So we started on trenches and shoring. We also looked at confined space in entry, and Chris was involved in this, and we got a vendor on board that's going to do site-specific study of what we do, how we do it, what equipment we have, what equipment we should have, and take us to a higher level of safety with respect to both trenching, confined space, and also the lifting portion of that. We're gonna take a look at facility security with respect to the fencing, the fencing themselves. We're also looking at drug screening providers. As we have found out, our policy requires some drug testing per accident. And it was not doing us any good to test somebody and get an answer in 5-6 days. So we're working on immediate testing results and working on a number of providers that are going to give us 24/7 coverage. And then, last but not least, more training is a big agenda for the steering committee as well.
Quick question, do you have random drug testing for the people in the sensitive position?
Yes, we have random drug testing for CDLs, DOT testing.
And the metrics that you have, is that those metrics that Lisa has put it in the strat plan?
We have a set of metrics on a slide that I think only represent a certain portion of what we should be doing on a standardized
Do
basis.
we use the pyramid of safety from near misses up? Do we capture near misses?
Let's just say theoretically, yes. In practice, you'll see the numbers that would suggest there's a little bit of shortfall on the near miss side. So I talked about the incident investigation and reporting. Well, again, I'm repeating a little bit. The use of checklist I found very useful. It was the best way to create standard answers, and believe it or not, when you get standard answers and standard questions, you're able to categorize your data a whole lot easier and actually be able to use the data to look at trends, look at things that are going on, look at frequencies, and be able to make sense of it, almost have the data talk to you. Would like to get a little bit more consistent notification of incidents when they do occur. We do want to start spending time learning and training on doing more robust investigations and documentation. I think the most important one up there for us is root cause identification, so that we can get out what happened, what really caused it, why did it cause it, and what can we do to fix it. Throwing that OSHA word out there, based recording and reporting, because at some point in time, our feeling is that OSHA is going to sometime, and it's lurking out there, end up getting control of all of the safety activities and governments and municipal authorities. So we want to move in the right direction so we're prepared. Again, using the metrics for deeper review of incidents and trends, and then past incidents, future program and prevention. Again, going back through what's going on, what policies need to change, how do we take some of these hazards, prevent them, mitigate them better than we're mitigating them, or protect them with PPE.
All right, moving on to safety training, some of the needs, trenching and shoring. In the near future, we have training and some demos of new equipment set up in the very near future. Confined space, EHS is, like Ed mentioned, working with 2 entities on training policies and procedures and upgrading fall protection equipment. Forklift training and lifting. As of right now, we have 3 individuals trained in certifying our employees as they get hired. And if they're going to be using any forklift equipment or lifting equipment, we have 3 individuals, one at DNC, one at the wastewater treatment plant, and one at Suburban that can train them immediately. So we don't have to really wait around for training, outside training. CPR and AED training, and also first aid training. This is for all employees. August and September, late August and September, we're having a training session for all the employees to get trained on them, specifically the AEDs. And that's about it for training in the near future.
So committee future things that we're looking at, again, policy review, I've mentioned that a couple times. I think site inspections are a big thing. They reveal some things at facilities you know, are important. As mentioned in the strategic results, and we want to do something more robust on the onboarding side in terms of a structured approach to training new employees and getting them on board quickly on a standardized basis. Practice drills found over the years, if you want to get people to evacuate timely, quickly, if you want to have people respond to things in a proper manner, you got to practice it. So we're going to start practicing these things. And then I think we're exploring right now whether or not we need to have first aid teams at the facilities themselves, and who would be on them. I know it's a little bit more difficult in the field, but we're exploring that right now. So,
That's the safety site inspection. Each site, they will do their own site
you
inspection.
can, at
We
this,
don't do it right now. Do we?
he's actually, Kevin's doing that for the most part, but we need to be able to take that and make it more regular and frequent by moving it to the safety committees and also to the facilities themselves.
That's something just, my experience was, you know, we have organization A, B, and C. So A was doing their own safety, but the fact was, since they were working in that organization, they could not see the fault that they had. So what we started to do is started scattering. So they said, you know, so site B is going to do inspection A is going to do C. Therefore, it started highlighting that the team could not see. It's something to consider that, you know, that could be helpful on identifying things that people normally would not be able to see.
Absolutely, your point is well taken, because we used to do the same thing. We used to take, using your ABC example, C would do A, B would do C. At some point in time, the steering committee would actually just go out on their own. Each one of them would do safety committee inspections too. So, yeah, I think we need to incorporate a lot of that.
And the other one, just think about, you know, we don't need to reinvent the wheels, right? There are a lot of companies around here that have all the OSHA required form. They are embedded in the ERP system that by a phone call, you can get all the forms that have been vetted and work on for, you know, 50 years. So
Oh, absolutely. In fact, everybody looks at OSHA as the black hat, but they have some really neat stuff out, and that could be a resource for everyone. So.
And a question for you, as far as policy goes, what's your policy with contractors? So we use lots of contractors. Do you just make them do their own thing? Do you just stay away? Do you inspect them? Is that something you guys should look
I
into?
can't, Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure that we have a robust contractor
In
inspection.
our contracts, it mostly says they must follow OSHA requirements.
Mhm.
We do not inspect them.
Right, and I know there's lots of, no offense to Mike, but depending on what attorney you talk to, there's different positions on how people handle it. Some say they have a safety plan, they follow it, it's their issue, we don't want to be involved. Other people are reviewing and approving a safety plan from the contractor, so then they are involved and making sure they're following it. So I just was curious.
So my 2 cents. From a BPP organization, we always stood responsible for that contract.
Yeah.
So we checked them out before they came in.
Right.
We inspected them when they were there, and I actually threw contractors out of the building because they were not following safe practice.
Yeah.
But, you know, I shut down an entire plant because we almost had an issue.
So to answer his question, are we inspecting contractors or not?
We do.
We do. So especially in the field, when we're doing main lays and we have guys come in for specialty stuff, all the supervisors, foremen, managers, we all know enough to stop guys before they get in a hole if they don't have safety shoes, glasses, and hard hats on. They have to have high vis.
trenching.
Yep. We make sure that we follow the shoring guidelines as they are now. So I know that the field service crews are pretty, vigilant with that.
Thank you. Next step. Do we have require the contractors, those employees that can work in our facility, go through a training from our requirement from safety wise? Because I remember, the company that Ted used to run, there were specific people who were gone through the safety training in their products and got sign off, and they have to go through safety training to be updated because each company has a different safety standard. We have to make sure that those contractors meet our safety standard. Now, it might be lower, it might be higher.
I think that's a great point. I do know that, for the most recent project that we're doing with the SCADA stuff out in Suburban, what we did is we took all of their confined space material and all of their safety. We went through all of their programs and approved their programs, knowing that they were going to be on our kind of property. As for them sitting in and getting training from internal staff, I would argue that we haven't done that.
I would say that's not common in municipal, I said it's not common in municipalities at all. Yeah.
You deal with so many contractors and they come and they go and I don't know how you manage the whole thing.
Yeah, it costs a lot of time and money to do it, but all these programs, I think Amir brought it out earlier. They overlap. A key place to start when you hire a contractor in the contract is to reference whatever standard that you apply to, assure that everybody is trained in whatever the standard is, and that you're operating in accordance with your quality assurance program or somebody else's. And then you make sure that, for lockout tagout, I would never rely on somebody else coming in and saying, oh, I was trained on lockout tagout. I could train them in our lockout tagout program in 45 minutes into an hour. And you're not going into the field unless you know what our requirements are. The same thing like forklift operators. You should have a list, I'm sure you do, Kevin, of who can operate a forklift and who can't, and you don't want to see a contractor jumping on a forklift if they're not certified to do it. There's so many other things out there when you come to contractors, but I'm more concerned actually with our own employees right now. Are we doing annual fit tests for respirator training and annual audio hearing? Do we do that so we have a baseline of where people are? In our CPR training program, do we include how to use AEDs? I imagine we do. It's probably part of the setup. Confined space rescue training, not just what a confined space is, but rescue. Do we rely on our own personnel putting a tripod together and doing the rescue? Or, like the last power plant I was at, we went from doing that on our own years ago to relying on the outside ambulance force to do that. So we didn't have to really even entertain the thought of doing confined space rescue using that equipment. So I don't know where we are with that. Could you shed some light on that for me, one of you guys? I threw a lot at you there.
I can speak to the confined space, Mark, if that's all right. As part of the evaluation that we're currently in, they're evaluating all 4 of our locations because there are 4, probably 3 different styles of confined space. Andrew's guys are more plant-based. A lot of my field guys are trenching, using shoring based. And the outside company that's evaluating that is going to write SOPs specifically related to that. Once we have the SOPs in place, Ed, DHS, and the rest of the staff here have committed to making sure that all of our guys are properly fitted with the proper equipment as recommended by the SOPs that we're getting done. Once we have the equipment in place, the final step of that is going to be in-house training for 89 separate individuals, I believe. Miller Environmental has an external 48-foot trailer that they tow from site to site. We're going to do 8 different classes for all of our team members that do confined space. And they're going to have real-time simulations of what it would be like in the specific type of confined space that these people are going to be working through. And finally, on top of that, we're picking out multiple individuals from each of our 4 locations that will be what we're going to call the A team, the rescue team. That will be notified anytime that there is going to be a confined space entry at any of our locations. They're going to be kind of site specific so that when confined space is going to happen, we do know that the rescue team can be prepared to enter if needed. So, you know, specifically for that one, Mark, I think we're well on our path to being right.
Okay, and all that information will be posted on your confined space entry permit right at the site of the confined space, I would imagine, so the radio guy can contact whoever it is.
Yes, sir. It's all part of
Okay.
the SOPs that the companies are putting together for us.
Okay, in regards to the annual fit test requirements and audio hearing and stuff like that, you guys do all that too?
So we don't do audio testing at all.
Wow.
And for a fit test, I don't know that we do any sort of real, you know, we haven't really come across the need for a fit test of gear for confined space. The only time we do it is when we're going into sewer. And we have equipment that vents the sewer. We have meters that get dropped in beforehand, and all of our guys do wear personal meters as well. So as for specific fit tests for masks, I would say that we don't have ones defined for each individual.
Okay, well, so like if guys work around chemicals, I'm thinking maybe something at the wastewater treatment plant that they would require to have wear a respirator. I mean, don't they basically test for that? Don't they have to do an annual fit test for that?
No, so basically everything at the wastewater plant now is relatively mild as far as hazard wise. When we had chlorine gas,
Chlorine, yeah.
We used to go through a very strict physical with an audio test, vision test. They tested for more things in our blood than I can even name.
That was HAZWA.
Yes, and now that we have gotten rid of gas, we no longer have that program.
That's good. That was kind of scary. I will throw one thing out though. When I toured Klein's Island, I believe, one of the positive things I saw there, and this was several years ago, is going down, there was a gallery. I don't exactly know where it was anymore, but you had a piece of plastic conduit. And it was a specific location where somebody knew they could, you know, instead of going back and finding the MSDS sheets in the books, you actually had the MSDS sheets stored in that little plastic conduit tube or whatever it was. You guys familiar with what I'm talking about? That'd be like a good practice to do something like that.
We've
in your other
adopted that.
locations.
Yes, we've
What's that?
adopted that. We have adopted that at almost all of our locations now. You will see
That was a
little
good
TVs.
practice.
Yeah, it's definitely great.
Yeah, I like that. All right, gentlemen, I appreciate, oh, the other thing I wanted to point out is, and I don't know, maybe you're not even at the end of this yet. I know there was metrics. Number one was housekeeping, you know, in your tours, whatever. Which is always, a big checklist used to be housekeeping, tripping falls and hazard falls. The number of lost time accidents that are out there, a lot of them, you know, were for the bigger corporations involved, you know, office personnel tripping over filing cabinets and hitting their head or whatever, and not realizing they were in that requirement where they should have reported the accident. And then they went to the doctor the next day and then called off from work because they weren't feeling well. So when to report and recognizing, do we have any program for like office personnel on what is a lost time accident and the numbers that you're going to show in your metrics? How many of those numbers really involved office personnel?
Let's look at the metrics then.
You have 9 reportable. So 9, how many of them are office?
So these are
That seems fine.
metrics that we were talking about that show 2022, 2021, and where we are year to date, 2023. I was asked the question before, what concerns me? Well, if you look at 2023 and go back to 21, a very first line, 5 near misses to 2 near misses to no near misses. I get a little concerned when I don't see no near misses, because ultimately near misses become hits. And
The
so
reporting mechanism, maybe it's the reporting mechanism.
well, I
What do you
think it's,
think?
I think there's a way for them to report it. I just think there needs to be a whole lot more set of logistics to make sure that people understand how valuable this is and what they need to really tell us and what that tells us. I think we recognize that we need to do that, that will be part of what the EHS steering committee is going to undertake as well, is some way to make that work through the organization. And I guess as we're looking at the metrics, just to solidify why we put the EHS steering committee was the questions that came up and the answers from the guys that are already sitting on the committee, so. Employee injuries totaled, we're at 10 so far in 2023. And vehicle incidents are around 10. So far we've got 20. If you just look at the breakdown, well, one of them is a first aid case of the 10. 9 of them are OSHA recordables. And I guess the trend right now would be to suggest that, well, we're more likely to surpass where we were in 2022. On OSHA recordables, we have 1 lost time accident, 8 non-lost time accidents, which totals the 9. 1 lost time accident is all recent, and when respond to the number of incidents, how many were office people? Chris and Andrew, you can correct me, believe just 1.
No, I believe it should be 2.
2?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what the metrics look like. I mean, that gives you flavor for what we're trying to record. It's very OSHA-like in terms of the breakdowns. Lost time days are at 9, and that's clicking upward because that person's still off. And restricted duty days are at 5 right now. You can see what the comparison to the other years is. Yeah. Kevin will walk you through this one.
Okay, our insurance costs. PERMA, that's Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Risk Management. We belong to their pool. They carry our general liability, also our liability and compensation and damage for our vehicles. Public official liability they carry. And also the contract with the city they also carry. With it, it's a total of $347,000. Some of our other insurance costs are property, which property they cover the city and the suburban area. That's Murray Securus, and CNA also carries their subsidiary of Murray Securus. That's $304,000 just in property. Workman's comp, that's Delaware Valley Workers' Comp, other known as Divot. Pollution liability for the pre-treatment plant and also wastewater treatment plant. That's H.A. Thompson supplies that. Comp and collision. That comp and collision is for we have 6 vehicles that are very expensive, anywhere from $280,000 to $550,000. So we carry a comp and collision in those vehicles. So we're covered if we don't want to be paying out a full price of a $500,000 vehicle. Liability in Norfolk Railroad, that was just this year, and that was because we were in their easements. And we also carry an employee dishonesty bond from H.A. Thompson. And that leaves us with our total insurance of $850,000, which was an increase of about, which I was really pleased with this number, only a 1.2% increase from 2021. And then also at the bottom, self-insured, where we're self-insured with our vehicles. This is both city and suburban. You can see we had a high hit in 2022, and that was due to a vehicle. It was a vacuum truck, a combo vac. The boom got hit by a guide wire and ripped the boom off the truck, and that was $42,000 itself to repair that vehicle. So that's why that was so expensive. Other than that, you have any questions on the insurance costs?
I have a question.
Sure.
How did your workman's comp go down 23%?
I'm sorry?
How did your workman's comp go down 23%?
That is because we had very good records in the last couple of years. It went up, you can see it went up in 2020, it was up I believe 12.93%, and then it came down again at 5%, and it came down another 23.11%.
Some of that also has to do with the nature of the movement.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just saw that it was pretty dramatic, yeah. Is there directors and board directors insurance up there?
yes,
Good.
yep,
Check.
yep, there, yeah, you're insured.
And I have a question, Mr. Chairman. One of the things I used to get, when I first started way back, we used to get paid once a month. And it really hurt after the first month. But one of the things, even though we weren't paid overtime because we were salaried employees, we had to log the hours that we worked. And, you know, it was brought to my attention for various reasons, but one of the reasons that they came about was, oddly enough, insurance costs was hours worked without a lost time or hours worked without an employee accident on the job or whatever. Do you guys keep track of non-paid hours that you work somehow that you can submit that for insurance claims to the insurance provider? Has anybody ever thought about that?
When you say track non-lost time,
Well, put it this way. If I'm supposed to work 168 hours a month and I put in, I don't know, say I put in an extra 2 weeks monthly on average, that's basically 80 hours I'm working that I'm not getting paid for, but I'm on the job site. So that's like 50% of the time that I'm worked. And they urged us to log that. And this is a major utility I work for, because they would basically get a credit towards their insurance from their insurance provider that they're working safely and they didn't have a lost time accident with all those people that were working there. Those extra hours, even though they weren't compensated hours, there were still hours on the books that our employees were working. I mean, this was the 90s, so I don't know if it's still something they look at anymore.
we haven't seen it on this table. I think you're referring to an injury illness rate, which is basically calculated by taking the number of injuries and illnesses divided by the total hours worked. And that we do that. That's not in this table, what we do that.
Okay.
For non-paid hours.
Which you don't, it's difficult to account for the non-paid hours, yes.
How would you document it?
Yeah.
Each individual. Checking in at a plant, you can do it, but.
Yeah, for doctors,
I don't
yeah,
know.
for unpaid hours, that's extremely
Take people's
difficult.
word for it. You can do that.
Well, we had to work two weeks straight before you get 1 hour overtime. So I guess it was pretty much logged. And then after a while, you just gave up on it. I said, you know, I'm not even gonna bother for 1 hour's overtime. And then they explained it to me that way. So that's why we did it. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
So just to summarize quickly, I think the program is fairly good. I think if you compared what we're doing to a number of other authorities, you will find out that we're doing pretty good. Now, does that mean that means we're perfect? No, I think there's a lot of things that are readily improvable. I think putting the EHS steering committee on board is going to drive a lot of improvement activity. So I think we can do much better, and I'm really happy that we did this and the way we're moving. So.
Thank you. And I think that you guys have a lot of pieces together. I think bringing the pieces that talk to each other so you can bring some actionable items, that's going to be the key step going forward. And also remember, safety starts with the leadership.
Yes, it does.
It always starts with the leadership. It's from top down rather than from bottoms up. So that's we have to keep down. Thank you again. We appreciate for presentation. Looking forward to see progress. This number metrics getting lower and lower as we go forward. Cool. Okay. Now we can move to the board. There's a presentations which is in the blue paper regarding the Allentown Division large meter chamber replacement project. And we saw is Chuck, please.
Yes, Amy is going to present this one. It's this project consists of replacement of 114 what we call large meters. They're between 3 inches and 8 inches. The meters are at least 10 years old and or non-functioning, non-reporting. So Amy's going to discuss the details of this project. So take it away, Amy.
Okay, so this project is strictly for meters in the city, in Allen town. They're the commercial Omni meters that were, I believe, most of these were replaced at the same time about 12 years ago prior. It was right around when we took over lease. So the battery in the measuring chamber has a 10-year lifespan, so now they're starting to fail, and we need to replace the chamber, which is basically the guts of the meter. We don't have to take out the entire meter now, unbolt it and remove it. We can just take out the inner workings of it and replace it. Some of them, the metering staff has been doing some of them. We purchased some of the meters, a few, not a few, but a portion of them last year and a portion this year. They've been working at it, but there's just too many for them to keep up and do all their other work duties. So we contacted Core and Main through CoStars to get a price for the installation of these meters. They came back to us with a price of $146,210. So we're asking for authorization to approve that with some incidental staff and contingency costs for a total of $181,210. To get in and replace them.
Any question from board member? In the safety presentation of tired of it. Maybe it's. You're not getting any questions. Everyone.
Well, the project will be done safely.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure of that. So seeking authorization for the amount of $181,210 for the large meter chamber replacements. Can I get a motion and a second, please?
So moved. This is Norma.
Thank you, Norma.
Second, this is Sean.
Thank you, Sean. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Monthly project.
Yeah, so we covered a lot of territory today. And in the project report, you'll see there are a few items still remaining in July. A couple of them are more standard items. We do have an update to the suburban water and wastewater tapping fees, which we'll bring to you. Typically, we do them mid-year or in December, kind of flip-flop sometimes, depending on when we get them done. This year, we're doing them mid-year. So we'll see those next time, along with the normal monthly financial and operations reports. And then we have one project authorization we'll be asking for related to studying PFAS treatment options. So that'll be in the next meeting. If there's any questions about the project update, that's on the Funds Island wastewater pump station project. And any other questions on any of the other items listed?
Any question from board member? Well, you're coming to an end, so staff comment.
I have nothing further.
Some comments.
I have one comment that I won't be here next meeting. Someone will be here in my place because I'm going to be on vacation. And I did want to say that, and I've said this before, when I hear about all the strategic planning that's being done and the operational work that is done, it's amazing to me how much work LCA does as an organization for the public. It's just which is wonderful.
Thank you. Any public comment? None, okay. Any board comment? Board members comment?
Let's follow up with Mike. I won't be at the next meeting either. Be on vacation.
Together?
He would never go with me. He would send me home.
Amir, this is
Yeah,
Brian. I just wanted to thank you for chairing the meeting today. Appreciate that.
You're welcome, thank you.
Yeah, but just a comment in general. In fact, the screen is my comment. The staff is always here. The board is here sometimes, and notwithstanding vacations, I don't talk about that, but we don't try to get people coming in live, or is there I know we're post-COVID and people might have different feelings about that. I've been on other nonprofit boards. We have the same issue, by the way. But it seems that COVID has created an absenteeism at the board's meetings that we managed quite effectively, but I don't know if anyone ever talks about being live on Monday afternoons.
Yeah, I think that's a board discussion.
Okay.
Not for me to really say, but I will say that a lot of organizations that I see are still doing hybrid. It's still pretty common.
Yeah.
County commissioners are still doing
Are they?
hybrid.
Yeah.
And Jenny and Brian, who were faithful followers,
I understand
their
that.
ability to attend by Zoom, I think allows for them to attend.
Absolutely.
And staff who don't have agenda items to allow them to attend.
Sure.
Not be in person. But as far as board attendance live, I think that's a board discussion.
Want to bring it up?
Brian or Amir, I don't know if you have any thoughts on how you want to respond to that.
I think that's something that the board has to discuss privately, because this is decision between us rather than, the other way, so.
And I have no answer to this. It's not a criticism. I just a state of the state kind of a thing. Yeah, it's just interesting. Maybe it's the future. We're in the future.
I'd encourage every board member to attend it if they can in person. It's much better to work that way. Unfortunately, I can't be a good role model in that case because I'm away a lot. So if you're in the area, I'd encourage you to attend the board meeting personally.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody participation, and have a great and safe week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.